So today we're going to be having a panel discussion with some of the leading mobile luminaries from our industry. We'll be talking about a range of topics around mobile for about 30 to 40 minutes, and that'll be followed by your questions and answers to those. If you've got a question that you'd like to ask, don't wait to the end of the panel discussion. Type it in the minute that you think of it, and you can either type it into Twitter and put the hashtag #NewMR, or in the GoToWebinar software, you can use the question box and type your question in there. Both of those are great. So a little bit of brief advertising material before we get started. NewMR can't bring you these events without the help of their sponsors. So showing up on the screen will be a list of sponsors. They're all people that help us, so we'd like to encourage you to perhaps visit our e-exhibition and have a look at what some of their services are. A special big thanks though to our platinum sponsor for 2014 Survey Analytics. And another shout out to our mobile collaborator, which is MRMW, stands for Market Research in the Mobile World. They have a series of conferences at different times of the year, and they've got two coming up in the remainder of 2014. You can catch them in Berlin from the 23rd to the 26th of September, and then in Cape Town from the 5th to the 6th of November. We actually have one of their team with us today, so you'll perhaps get to hear a little bit from him shortly. Okay, so now I'd like to actually start the formal part of proceedings and welcome you once again. And I'd like to just start bringing in my panel members for today. We'll have some brief introduction, we'll talk through some questions, and then we'll give you a little bit of information about the book and follow that up with some Q&A. So this is a snapshot of all the panel members who are with us today. You're probably familiar with most of them. We won't do introductions now. What I've asked people to do is the first time they have a question, just to give a little bit of background to them, their company, or their interest in mobile market research. So to start off our questions, I really wanted to get some people's views on why mobile is so important. Jens, I thought we'd start with you. Jens is from the Mobile Market Research in the Mobile World conferences that I mentioned just a minute ago. So Jens, would you like to share with us why you think mobile is so important?
Oh, I get to kick things off. Thanks very much, Sue. The ball might court. 2 sentences of introduction. As you already mentioned, we're working with Merlin Institute on the Global MRMW Conference Series and make it our main task to discover innovations in mobile market research, but also new technologies that could potentially help market research in the future. Why I think mobile is so important, one of the 4 questions that I had particularly highlighted for myself, but I think mobile is to some extent a natural extension as a tool and as a platform, as a technology of what Research is trying to achieve. I think there's a lot of very interesting discussions that through mobile or challenges that through mobile can be advanced. Just looking at topics such as out of home, getting closer to the moment of truth, removing researchers' bias. I think all these things are challenges that through mobile can definitely be reduced and helped.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jens. Mark, I'd like to throw to you next. I mean, you've obviously been involved, and I'll let you introduce yourself, in mobile for quite some time now.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon. My name is Mark Michelson, and I'm co-founder of the Mobile Market Research Association. Our primary goal is to advocate the use and proper use of mobile devices globally for all types of data collection for marketing research. We do this through partnering with various associations and conferences to conduct workshops and get hands-on. So I think it's important because, frankly, it's become ubiquitous in our society. Even today's Time cover and the release this week of the announcement of the iWatch and more wearables, more of the Internet of Things is also mobile. So I think mobile goes way beyond our smartphones and our tablets. I think it goes into the very fabric of our lives and becomes a part of our everyday living And so when technology is so ubiquitous and we have the ability to tap into that with proper permissions and respect of privacy, it can really change the way that people buy products and the way that they are able to give feedback into the companies that create those products, and to shape things much more customized and personalized to their specific needs and tastes.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Pete, I'd now like to get you to introduce yourself and perhaps let us know why you think mobile is important.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. This is Pete from SSI, SSI Sampling. That's often said, and in fact, I think it's from McKinsey. McKinsey says there's three things. There's three things. If you've got two, you haven't got enough. And if you've got four, you've got one too many. And if there's three things about mobile and market research, I mean, it's either using the phone to do market research, people using the phone, or it's doing market research using the phone. So it's us wanting to use that, or perhaps it's sampling people through their phone. But whichever one of these three we're talking about, SSI is in the business of supplying people to do surveys first and foremost. And some of those people are going to be doing their surveys on their mobile phone right now, whether you like it or not. So my particular interest is in making sure that people can do surveys on a mobile device, so the design elements of it. What is it that made mobile so important? I think I take on board what Mark has just said about the wearable side of it, but mobile to me feels like the end of device convergence, as the accelerating convergence that we've been seeing over the last 10, 15 years suddenly seems to have spiraled into mobile as the communication device of choice of almost everybody, and it affects everything that we do, and therefore that's why it's so important.
Okay, great. Thanks, Pete. Okay, so now I'd like to sort of turn our attention to what are the key trends that we want to watch out for. Kristin, I'll start with you because you've always got a view on this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would have, Mark sort of echoed a lot of my feelings on the space. I think, mobile is so important because it's evolving so quickly, and I think, today we seem like we're really focused on phones and tablets, but from my perspective, that's literally just today. I mean, if we look at wearables, if we look at the Internet of Things, and you can envision sort of the scale of growth that's coming down the pipes, and when we look at future growth at Decipher, and I think just across the industry in general, in our development strategies, we're almost solely focused on mobile, and so I think wearables are definitely something that we're looking at, specifically behavioral and activity trackers, and then everything from flexible fibers to the Internet of Things. I've got Nest in my home, and we're really looking at what are different ways that we can collect data from respondents, both actively and passively. Using all these new devices, and I think it's it's not only challenging, but it's an incredibly exciting space to be in right now.
Okay, thanks, Kristin. Richard, what sort of trends are you watching out for at the moment?
Thanks, Sue. Hi, everyone. So I'm Richard Owen. I'm the founder of CrowdLab. Just to give you a bit of context, and we have built basically specialised in mobile applications for market research projects. So I think the key things, interestingly, sort of we're all talking about the far-reaching things of wearables and those kind of things, but the kind of the hottest trend we've seen in this year is actually agencies and clients working out how to get more out of mobile beyond just having the ability to say launch surveys. So playing around more with methodologies now in terms of things like giving people activities and tasks to generate sort of content and response in the moment rather than necessarily asking direct questions. That's sort of become a big thing for us, and working out how you get people to feedback sort of very naturally, almost reporting back on their lives without necessarily being guided to just respond to direct questions. So that's quite interesting. We're trying to obviously access behavior rather than memory, and so I think that working out how to do that is really interesting. The other two sort of big things we work with at CrowdLab a lot at the moment are the real integration of sort of qualitative and quantitative. I mean, mobile really allows that to sort of flourish, with obviously the ability to have questions and surveys, but the ability to report back through video, audio, etc. So how do you, it's always been something in research that everyone talks about as a natural fit, that blending of methodologies, but we're really seeing, sort of working on how you best do that, so that both disciplines, if you will, can flourish rather than get diluted. So that's quite an interesting trend. And then I think the other big thing is that the amount of sort of content we get back, in terms of different sorts of data, between sort of numbers and video and audio, is how you curate all that. And I think the sort of the curation of content, and how that trend and so forward, and looking at working with partners to help researchers sort of get to grips with the amount of stuff we're able to generate out of mobile projects.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Alistair, at On Device, what are you guys seeing happening in the markets that you work in?
So, sorry, just to introduce myself, I'm Alistair. I'm the CEO of On Device Research. We're a mobile survey technology and sample company. And so the biggest trend which we see, and possibly one of the biggest opportunities in market research at the moment, is running along with the theme that never before has almost every single adult in the entire world had a computer in their hand. And so if you think about the desktop computing world, there's around 1 billion people who have one of those in front of them. In a couple of years' time, about 5.5 billion people will have a computer in their hands. It's absolutely phenomenal, completely game-changing. And so what we're actually seeing is an awful lot of our customers coming to us in many emerging markets who are currently really struggling with quite often very fraudulent face-to-face research, where a lot of interviews are made up and are expensive, and the quality of the data is really, really questionable. And actually mobile fixes that problem. And so we estimate there's about $1 to $1.5 billion of spend in face-to-face research in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, which will all transfer over to mobile research over the course of the next 5 to 10 years or so. And so there's a massive trend for that happening at the moment.
Thanks, Alistair. So, Matt, we'll just get you to jump right in and give us some ideas of the sort of trends that you've been keeping an eye on.
Sure, yeah. Just to give you a little bit of context, I mean, I'm the MD of HOMMR. We're dedicated to doing food and drink research, and so essentially we're kind of at the coalface working with clients and trying to apply technology, mainly to try and understand what it is that people want from food and drink products, and then to help them translate that into the physical product. So the big trend from us that we found from clients has been an understanding that accessing reality needs to improve, and what we found is that by using mobile techniques, we can get closer to the consumer at the point at which things actually happen. So there's I think a lot of technology in the past, sort of around the online side of things, has been looked at as a way of making things quicker and cheaper, and certainly the online revolution kind of took us down that route. Where we see mobile is a chance to actually do things better. So it allows us to talk to consumers as they're choosing a coffee in a coffee shop, as they're testing a product for us at home. And we're just believing that by accessing reality in a much better way, that's getting us better data, and it's allowing us to help clients make better decisions. So that's the huge advantage that we thought is brought about, and certainly there's demand from clients in that respect. I think somebody else also picked up on the geography angle, and that's certainly something that we intend to use. We do a lot of global work and have the same kind of challenges when you're collecting data in countries like India and Brazil, and we're hoping that the use of mobile to some extent will allow us to let the respondent take control for the quality of data that gets entered. So both from a standard kind of survey thing where they'll complete it on their mobile, but also giving it the opportunity to recruit people themselves in places like India. So village leaders, that kind of thing, who can go off, use technology, collect data in that kind of way for us, and therefore avoid the whole kind of interviewer bias type areas. So they're the two kind of key drivers for us as an agency dealing direct with clients.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So I suppose we're all talking about mobile. We've actually written a whole book about it. So there has to be a certain amount of mobile work being done, and maybe mobile's already arrived. So I was going to ask people to what extent they think mobile is already here. Pete, I'll get you to jump in first on that one, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah. I mean, to my first point, you know, people using the phone to do MR, that is here, and it's been here for a while. I think Kristin's got some great data on the evolution of that over time, and it cannot be ignored. So put that to one side. What I see is happening right now, and the trend is for us to do things that we weren't able to do before, or to do things better, as I think Matt alluded to as well. So it's doing research that's only been possible to do because there is a mobile phone. So we're talking about now about geolocation, geofencing, in the moment research, the melding of qual and quant. These things are here, but I think we're in experimental mode in that area, and I think that's where the excitement will be, but it's not here in mission critical work right now. I think it's here in experiment, and it's really interesting.
Thanks, Pete. Kristin, I think Pete alluded to the fact that you might have some good data that might be relevant to jump in here, or you can choose to ignore that and just answer the question without data.
No, we have a lot of data around that. Actually, I'm really glad that you kicked off with Pete, because I think, I think the sample companies are the, unfortunately the ones that are the most challenged in the space right now. It's interesting. I was just having a conversation with Melanie Courtright of Research Now when I was in Nice this last week, and I think to the extent that mobile's already arrived, I think we're still really in the infancy stages, and I don't think it's from a lack of technology. I mean, you look at companies like SSI and Research Now, and companies like OnDevice and CrowdLab. There's so many great applications, great tools, great panels available. But I think the lack of mobile research that's being conducted is really being driven by the current research design. And Reg, I'm sure will have some of his 2 cents to put in there. But I think that it's not just about clients getting on board, but it's really with the research companies getting on board. I think that we're just beginning to see clients being receptive to designing surveys for cross-platform respondents. By cross-platform, I mean people that are some people are taking surveys online, some are taking them on mobile, some are doing device switching mid-survey. We don't really see a whole lot of clients designing strictly for mobile because I think it involves making lots of tough choices about which questions are important, and I think we're so used to living in a environment where we sort of bombard respondents with questions, and I think we've sort of forgotten to design for what's most important versus just kind of throwing the kitchen sink in because we've been able to in the past. So definitely, I think the design has some catching up to do with the technology, but I feel, looking at the work that we're doing with our clients, I feel hopeful that we're getting closer to that, and that people are starting to understand the importance of designing for mobile devices, and that the respondents are really driving that, and I'm looking forward to sort of seeing what happens next in the industry.
Thanks, Kristin. Mark, what's your view on the extent to which mobile's already here?
Well, it's definitely here. Interestingly, our curriculum has changed quite a bit from basic qualitative, quantitative, passive type of tracks to more focused on application and types of studies. So we see it playing a huge role in ethnography and shopper journey mapping, those types of applications. It is becoming more in demand among clients, and to Kristin's point, I agree, more agencies seem to be married to their existing technologies and methodologies. Unlike what happened with online, from telephone to online, this is a really different beast altogether. It's not something that's intended to replace or calibrate to existing studies or trackers or that kind of thing. And we hear it all the time: long live the tracker's dread, etc. I don't believe that it's intended to replace, but rather to supplement, to bring to life, and some of the best designs that I've seen frankly, are hybrids or bricolage type design where you do incorporate some, and I hate the phrase in the moment, but some contextual research along with some of the recall type research.
Thanks, Mark. Matt, what's your view on the extent to which mobile's here?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree a little bit with what Alistair said there. I think most research agencies are naturally quite nervous about trying new things, and that's been the case when I look through some of our research team as well. Everybody likes to have seen somebody else have a success story before they sort of jump on board, and I think a lot of the work that we do is actually collecting data via apps. So there's that the extent to which you have to get people to download the app in the first place. And when we were dabbling around with this a couple of years ago and we first started it, the panel companies weren't exactly keen and they weren't pushing it, and I think that made people nervous. Gradually over time that's got better, we've worked out ways of making sure that the download rates are at an acceptable level, so our researchers have got a lot more confident about it. But still, I think one of the problems you get with this kind of new approach is that there's a tendency for the researchers to offer it as a little extra onto what they'd normally do. That kind of nervousness comes through and they're trying to slide it into projects instead of being as confident as they need to be. And it's only once we got through the hurdle of running the first 3 or 4 and getting the headaches out of the way that our research guys became a lot more confident, and then we were able to go to clients, and actually say, look, this is the way to do this. We're happy for you to step away from your recall UNA 40-minute questionnaire and instead get a panel of 300 people to download the app, and every time they experience a certain usage occasion, collect the data on there. So you move away from a huge UNA type survey to collecting a lot of little bits of information. And what we found is that was just so much more powerful when you put all of that together. You were actually getting a picture of what was happening in the market, rather than what people kind of recalled. And you add the kind of insight and the flavour that the ability to take video and photos can give you into that mix as well. And suddenly what was a fairly dry 40-minute UNA kind of survey becomes totally to life, by being able to show video, being able to show photographs. And as soon as people start to see that, I think the buy-in kind of happens. Until it's been proven, until people realise that it can be better, you always get that kind of reticence. And I think that's probably where an awful lot of agencies still are. And hopefully that will get better, and people will start to move forward with this, because we've certainly done it on a whole host of applications. And as long as the survey is designed well and you're being realistic about what people will give you, how often they'll give it you, and how you design the survey, it will work. And we've always been delighted to find that once the respondents have downloaded the apps, as long as you keep things interesting, they'll stick with it, and they find it interesting. Obviously, when people are more engaged in a piece of research, you get better quality data. It's as simple as that. So, fingers crossed, it'll start to get a lot more traction.
Okay, so the next thing I wanted to ask the panel to have a think about is, what are the key new developments? What should people be thinking about in the here and now? What's really new as opposed to just sort of the evolutionary things we've been talking about. So to keep it simple, I'll start with Richard.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, I think just to build on what Alistair and Matt and most people were just saying, I think the really new stuff has to be approaching mobile not as an extension of sort of online research. I think it has to be thinking about what it is that makes mobile so special, the context that you can get from people. And we always view it as sort of mobile is really about the person. People are mobile, people are living busy, fragmented lives, and we have the opportunity to immerse ourselves in their world and collect these small sort of fragmented nuggets of what's going on in their life around a certain topic. And then I think, Matt, you mentioned as piecing it all together is the key thing. So I think the really new developments need to be a complete rethink of how we even approach setting up projects and how we put studies together in new and interesting ways, because I think people are using apps more and more. We talked about people are more willing to download them, but you've got to keep them engaged. They've got very little discretionary time, and so research apps need to engage them as much as other sorts of apps, which does create sort of tensions and and headaches and getting people to really rethink the way they approach these things. So a lot of the new developments, I think, have to be first and foremost around cracking, it may be sort of the basics of market research on mobile, but cracking it from the point of view that it's not just another place to take surveys. That's obviously what a lot of it is about, but not just sort of doing the same old stuff in a new space. So methodological innovation is still really, really important. I think from a technology point of view, wearables is obviously the big thing, and I think when the Apple Watch is going to be an interesting example, that when you can get people completing these sorts of projects we're talking about, and add to that other interesting data, we start to have something really powerful. I mean, just very top of mind, I was thinking about studies we do where, say, we're asking people to record their sort of thoughts and emotions in the moment when, say, placing a bet on we get people to talk about sort of pre, during, and post the sort of the emotional highs and lows of gambling. Now, if you can add that to something like the Apple Watch, it's also tracking some of their heart rates and other biometrics and things like that, you start to have something really, really powerful. So I think that will be the place the really new stuff starts to get interesting. And then the last thing, I think iBeacons is another thing that geofencing's talked about a lot. We still talk to clients who don't have particularly great experiences of it. Both the technology is not quite there, but also delivering sort of the samples of people who walk into those areas. But as that whole area gets a lot better, then I think all the promise of geofencing will really start to come home. So clearly new technologies, but also I think we also just need to keep pushing on really rethinking methodological innovation as much as technological.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Kristin, what are your thoughts around key new developments that people should be keeping an eye out for?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I had a bunch of conversations about this when I was in Nice. I think at Decipher, we really see more of a focus on mobile web, either driving on-the-go research or as an addition to apps. And I think a lot of that is just due to issues with app distribution. I think it's easy to get your app distributed if you have your own panel, or if you're working on a proprietary panel or client-supplied sample. But for a lot of companies, they're not able to get an app distributed easily, and so we're partnering more and more with app-based survey technologies to get a more representative sample of the mobile respondent. I only see that increasing in the future. And then I think, or at least I hope, that we're going to see more focus on incenting good mobile-friendly survey design, not just from survey services and technology companies like Decipher, but also from the panel companies. And I know I had a couple conversations with panel companies at SMR about trying to incent good design and good responding experiences. And then I think also, as Richard mentioned, piecing all of these things together is going to be increasingly important, and that goes not just from the data collection component, but also looking at ways of combining ancillary data sources, whether that's from wearables or other mobile activities, with this primary research data, and really creating data visualization tools that really help illuminate these masses of data, for our clients.
Thanks, Kristin. Jens, you probably get to see a lot of new developments when you're, like looking at the synopses and things that people submit to your conferences. Are you picking up on anything that the other speakers haven't mentioned in the sort of area of key new developments?
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, I think first of all, a lot of it has been mentioned. I think Mark and Kristin mentioned sort of the Internet of Things and M2M communication. I would think from our perspective, when we're putting together our conference and the programs, we also play a little bit with the question, what is mobile? If you're talking mobile phones, tablets, relating back to the earlier question, I think undoubtedly mobile has arrived. But then we're taking a little bit of a look outside the market research industry and see what technologies are emerging there, what is being developed. Richard mentioned the smartwatch as well. A couple of years back, we brought in Google Glass. This year, we're talking about smart shirts at the conference. So I think, when we're looking at what has been done in market research so far with tablets and phones, probably we haven't seen something truly revolutionary. But I think there's a lot of devices and technologies out there that can be tapped into that might not even be considered valid tools for market research now. I think M2M interaction, very interesting aspect. We now have cars driving around collecting drivers' data, a lot of passive data collection. That too for us is mobile research, and for us that is, we're trying to sort of look into the future a little bit, whether it's at our workshops where we consider extreme scenarios. Some of those I've mentioned already. I think you can go even more extreme and look at implants as another evolution of wearable technologies. So I think there's a lot of developments out there. Some of them are taking place, or a lot of them are probably taking place outside the market research industry. But in the next few years, will probably become, some of them might become likely tools for market research.
Okay, I might see if we can get Reg to come in. Reg, are you there?
Am I here?
Yes, you're here now, Reg.
Yes. Okay. So in about 2 weeks' time, I'll become executive director of the Marketing Research Institute at the University of Georgia. And what we do is provide online training on a global basis to market research practitioners. And I will use some comments that Richard and Kristin just made to sort of segue into that, because I think it started with Richard, and I think Kristin made some of the same points, and that has to do with are we going to screw this up in the same way we screwed up online, right? I mean, the biggest transition in most of our lifetimes here has been the transition from telephone to online, and most of us are pretty disappointed in how that went. There was a tendency for us to simply take what we were doing on the telephone, turn it into more of a self-administered instrument, and to go ahead and post that out there. And to this day, I think most people would argue that we continue to have issues with questionnaire design. I, more than perhaps others on the call, would also say we have a lot of issues related to sampling that we've not really thought through very much. But so now we're in another one of these transition points where we face a lot of the same issues, and both Richard and particularly Kristin have talked about them. And so the whole issue is, how do we bring people along so that they understand how mobile is different, how to take advantage of mobile, and how to do it in a way that works for respondent, works for clients, and make sure that we get the kind of value out of it that we all believe is possible given the technology. And it's to that end that we at MRI went out and got experts in this case being two of the three co-authors of the book that we're all talking about today here, Ray and Naveen Williams, to put together an online course that takes about 10 hours. That's 10 modules trying to deal with everything from technology developments to questionnaire design to use for qualitative purposes to ethics to global to topics on where we think things are going from a kind of cutting edge point of view. And we offer it as a certified course for people in that direction, but we hope that there'll be some people who will tune into this simply because it's a way to try to brief people in a systematic fashion about how to do good mobile research and about how it has to be different than what it is we've done in the past, whether it's online, whether it's face-to-face, or whether it's telephone. So I think this conversation that's going on here, which is highlighting both the opportunities as well as the challenges we face, is a really good conversation, and it is the perspective that I think we're trying to take at MRI in terms of how do we bring the industry along, how do we bring practitioners into the loop here so that we do a much better job in the transition into mobile than we did in the transition from mostly telephone into online.
Thanks, Reg. If anyone's listening thinking they would like to undertake the mobile module that you offer at MRII, will they have to sit an exam at the end?
Oh, yes. If they want to be certified. But you know, the way it's structured is 10 modules. At the end of each module, there are these simple quiz questions, which are really self-assessments. And then at the end, if you want to be certified, you do have to do an exam. But the point of it really is to get people into thinking about what the issues are and how to go about designing really good mobile research.
Super, thanks, Reg. Alistair, we might get you to come in now and.
I'm here now. I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, okay. Yep. No, thanks, Alistair. We can.
I guess I'll try and be brief because I know that I'm coming in and out. That we see are particularly around the mobile advertising sector, and it's incredibly interesting what's happening there as the advertising on mobile devices is being used without cookies, and in a cookieless world, there are really new and interesting types of IDs which are being used to help our clients understand the effectiveness of advertising. And this is something which most people are not really talking about too much at the moment, but is actually a game changer for a number of.
Hi, we seem to have lost Alistair there, so we may get him to finish off his comments if he comes back on. Just a brief advertorial to accompany this broadcast. Obviously today, the main reason we've got everybody together to talk about mobile is to launch the Handbook of Mobile Market Research. And as you probably all know, the authors are Ray Pointer, Naveen Williams, and myself. While we've published the book, it has very kindly been also supported by SMR. In terms of formats, at the moment it's available as a hardcover book, and it's also coming out in a fairly wide variety of ebook formats. In terms of availability, as we speak, the SMR store, bookstore, their online store, has copies that are available, and I believe they ship them very quickly. They're offering a member's price of €24, and they're covering the postage and packaging. Wiley have an online bookstore that you can buy books at. Several of the Amazon sites will have books. At the moment, we know that the UK Amazon site has books and is shipping. They have arrived in stock in Singapore, but the US Amazon site, they're not expecting to have them till the 22nd of September, and there'll be a wide variety of ebook suppliers coming online at various times. In terms of the sort of content that's in the book, this is sort of a brief cut down of the table of contents. So the book's divided into 4 parts. There's an introductory part where you get an overview of mobile market research, a look at mobile research in action, and a description around the technology. Then in parts 2 and 3, you look at quite specific approaches to research, and in the final section, we sort of look at the ecosystem, some of the issues around ethics, laws and guidelines. We look at the current research on research that's available, but certainly as an industry, and I think what everybody's been talking about tonight, we really need to do more in that space. And then we take a little look at the evolving picture, which, I mean, we'll be moving ever so fast from here forward. If you'd like to have a look at a sample chapter of the book before you decide whether you need to buy it or not, if you Google, sample download of the Handbook of Mobile Market Research, there is a particular chapter around designing surveys that you can download, and that'll give you an idea of the flavour of the book. Although if you're an Amazon user, you'll be able to look at the book there on the Look Inside feature that they have. So in terms of question and answers, we'll now have a little bit of time to follow up on some of your questions. So if you've not asked a question yet that you'd like answered, now is the time to get typing and pop that question into the question box or tweet it using #NewMR. One of the questions that came up, and Kristin, it was directed at you, but if you feel like you're not the best person to answer it, we could perhaps get somebody else from the panel to chip in. It was a question around what are people doing to combine survey data and passive data together?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question and something that we're still sort of experimenting with. I mean, it's, when we look at combining data sources, we're looking at combining primary survey data, which is respondent level data, with this passive data that in many cases it's in a totally different format, or not sort of in the same format that we would generally see survey data in. And so we're sort of taking it on a case by case basis. We have a number of different clients that we're looking at that have either social media data from wearables or other devices, or from apps where they have permission to track certain behaviors. And then how do we aggregate that in one sort of like research intelligence platform, so that we're really getting more of a holistic view of what's going on with their brand or their brand health. And it is a challenge, and I think the most that we can do as an industry right now is to be open to new types of data, and to also really work with clients to experiment and to be honest about the fact that, hey, we're sort of learning together. And I think that's what makes it such an exciting time to be a researcher, is that we're not really just restricted to this primary research data anymore, but now we've got all these great new tools and data sources that we can experiment with.
Thanks, Kristin. This is sort of a statement asking for a comment, and the comment is, there's been a discussion about how mobile is different, e.g. changes the tracker, but this ignores the fact that you have likely been creating bias for years, missing young people, etc. And now we're seeing 40% mobile uptake on surveys. Comment.
It's certainly something you need to be very, very aware of, and it goes back to that one of the points that I made right at the start, which is the first element of mobile research, which is people choosing to take your survey on their mobile device. Now, if you weren't ready for that, and you weren't ready with your design, which goes back to the questionnaire design part of it, then you are going to start to see what look like changes in your tracker that are nothing more than changes in either mode or availability of people coming through the process. And yeah, if you had a biased start and you now got a better sample, then it's a sample change. We need to just be aware of what we're doing here and think pragmatically and think properly about what it is that we've been doing.
Yeah, just to join in on that, I was on mute before when I started to talk. The sort of, we just went through this transition where we're dealing with the reverse of that problem, which is in telephone surveys, we had these terribly biased samples because we couldn't get young people, mostly because they're never home. And yet when we discovered, when we begin to add calling and mobile devices in, suddenly we found that, we began to get young people in surveys, principally on mobiles. And so I think, we have kind of the reverse phenomenon perhaps at the moment, where purely mobile is concerned. But one of the issues that I don't think anyone really talked about a great deal here today is this whole notion that is a future of mixed mode, and the fact that getting at different populations may mean that we have to use different methods, different ways to get at them in order to get the kind of full representation that we might be looking for in our samples, so that we have participation with all kinds of people based on really what their own preferences are for how they're likely to respond to requests to participate in research.
We're almost running out of time. I'm just going to grab one more question before we move on. And somebody's asking, are there any tips for soon-to-be researchers entering the field? And clearly they should probably pick up a copy of the Handbook of Mobile Market Research, but has anyone got any other advice?
Oh, they should absolutely go to www.mrii.org as well to learn not just about mobile, but fundamentals of research in general.
I would say that they should learn what it's like to be a participant of the kind of studies that we're designing.
One more question from a grad class who are listening in from HOMMR College in Toronto. So hopefully there's a bunch. And it's a question about privacy, which hasn't cropped up yet. I think there are probably three things. We know that it's about informed consent, but actually we're beginning to be challenged about what informed really means. So if I say to you, you can monitor my phone, I may not realize just how much of my private life I'm giving away. And that consent becomes even more difficult if I take pictures of other people with my phone. Have I got their consent? And I know there has already been Council's opinion that in Europe, I cannot give you permission to read my emails that I've received from other people because I don't have the legal power to transfer those to you to read. So it's really important. The MMRA produced guidelines, the MRIA of working with things like the GRBN, SMR produced guidelines. So just because something is technically possible on mobile doesn't mean you should do it. Think about whether or not it would creep people out. That's often a good indication. And whether people can genuinely understand what they're consenting to.
I think I would just if I could, Ray, just elaborate on it just a tiny bit and to say that the way in which people need to think of this is because we're all accustomed to, as researchers, to this whole notion that personal data, personally identifying information needs to be kept confidential. And it's a simple thing here to think, well, with mobile, what we're able to do, particularly with video and telephone and photographs, etc., that this is a new kind of personally identifiable information, and it needs to be held just as close as a person's name or address.